Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. This week we're going to take it one of the more interesting looking Mardu commanders. This is Alesha, who smiles at death. Now don't be fooled by the missing white and black symbol in her mana cost. Alesha qualifies as a Mardu commander thanks to the two white and black symbols in her triggered ability. But what can Alesha bring to the table that other Mardu commanders can't? It's certainly not a huge amount of power or toughness, as there are other Mardu commanders who give more for less mana costs. No, the reason you're going to pick Alesha is because you want to play a build-around-me commander who interacts heavily with her graveyard. Her ability reads, whenever Alesha who smiles at death attacks, you may pay 2 hybrid white-black mana. If you do, return target creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. This allows us to cheat out potentially more expensive creatures with only having to pay double white, double black, or a white and a black. There are a lot of fun creatures who are able to be targeted by this ability, and Alesha has a very narrow but interesting spectrum of creatures that she can bring back. The downside of this ability is that Alesha has to be attacking in order to use it, but thankfully we're in the Mardu colors, which is a wedge that often bases itself around the combat step. So we know how Alesha functions, what she likes to do, and what she does best. Let's look at some ways to get her there and help you win some games. Now, since Alesha has a very strict requirement of a creature having 2 power or less for her ability to work on them, you need to build your deck to respect this ability, but not commit solely to it. There are a lot of good creatures in the Mardu wedge that are 2 power or less, so let's go over a few of those to start with though. Since we'll almost every turn be attacking with Alesha to bring back creatures thanks to her triggered ability, a creature like Drana, Liberator of Malakir, is a fantastic addition to our deck, as it can pump up all of our attacking creatures when she connects with the player. She has First Strike, which is an actual relevant vanilla ability, as it'll allow her to do combat damage before the other creatures who don't, essentially pumping them all up by +1/+1. New to our card pools, Angel of Invention is an interesting card thanks to Fabricate, giving us 3 bodies thanks to Fabricate 2, and being able to pump up our entire army thanks to her secondary ability. This angel offers us a ton of flexibility, which is something I love in EDH, as she can be either a giant beater, or help us go wide by providing us with more bodies. Anger is probably the only creature in this list that's 2 power that you're never going to want to reanimate thanks to Alesha. He is at the very best when he's sitting in your graveyard, relaxing and giving all of our creatures haste. Another interesting creature to the deck, and something that provides a very valuable service for Alesha, is Yahenni, Undying Partisan. He's almost good enough to just run as a free sacrifice outlet, but the fact that he's able to get bigger for every creature that our opponents control that dies, and his sacrifice ability makes him indestructible, making him a great blocker or attacker should you need. Duergar Hedgemage is a very interesting addition to our deck thanks to his Enter the Battlefield effects. His ETBs do require that you have 2 mountains and 2 plains in order for them to happen, but seeing as we're playing Mardu, even with the most greedy of mana bases, you'll chances are have at least 2 of each of them. Selfless Spirit is a fantastic way to protect Alesha from board wipes, but it's also a fantastic thing to sacrifice to its own ability at the beginning of combat to guarantee that Alesha survives through your combat step. You can then even bring it back with Alesha's triggered ability, basically allowing all of your creatures to have indestructible during combat steps. In a similar fashion, although she doesn't have to sacrifice herself, Mother of Runes is a great way to give Alesha protection from whatever your opponents are controlling in terms of creatures by giving her protection of whatever color you need. What makes this card a shoo-in for me is the fact that she only costs 1 white mana, and she's easily recurred thanks to her 1 power with Alesha. It's a pretty rare case nowadays for an EDH deck to not have some way to interact with their graveyard, and since we're running black, you'll chances are want to run Bojuka Bog, but I've been moving away from tap lands, which is why I'm happy to say that Agent of Erebos does a fantastic job of being able to be recurring graveyard hate on a body. What makes it even better is that his ability triggers whenever an enchantment comes into play under your control. Much to my surprise when researching this deck, Duplicant is actually a 2-powered creature by itself, which means that Alesha is able to cheat it out easily for only 2 mana. Considering some of the premium removal in the format is Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exiles, both of which cost 1 white, is it really hard to imagine yourself paying 1 extra white or black to basically deny your opponents gaining any kind of resources as a result of exiling their creature? The last creature I want to mention is probably one you're familiar with if you've seen Mycalia the Vast conquering your commander. It's a bit of a cheese card and it kind of works in tandem with a lot of the other spells we're going to be running, but Master of Cruelties can essentially take in an opponent for only 2 mana. I will caution you though, doing this game after game as your primary win condition is a fantastic way to alienate yourself from your friends, as they're not going to want to play against a deck that does the same thing over and over again. Moving on to sorceries, Faithless Looting offers us 2 ways of being able to draw and pitch cards, things that Alesha desperately wants. Sure, you're not really gaining any any real card advantage off of it, but it allows us to sculpt our hand and put valuable triggers that we may have drawn into the graveyard easily. Since we're running a graveyard heavy deck, Unburial Rites can easily find a spot in this deck as it can bring back any creature from our graveyard without a power restriction. It also doesn't hurt that it has flashback, as we're able to pitch it without having to worry about never casting it again. Retribution of the Meek is an on-theme, on-point, and hilarious board wipe to resolve against an opponent's board. The likelihood of our creature base having power 3 or less is almost guaranteed, which means that this board wipe can potentially take out all of our opponent's creatures while still leaving us with a healthy board. There are numerous options of artifacts that you can run in Alesha, but the few that I would run are the following. The first and strongest in my opinion is probably Key to the City. For only 2 colorless mana, this one artifact provides us with 3 valuable assets. First and foremost, it's a valuable and reusable on-demand discard outlet, allowing us to pitch creatures that we want to bring back with Alesha. It doesn't hurt that that discard effect also allows us to make Alesha unblockable. Lastly, whenever it untaps, we're able to pay 2 colorless mana to draw a card. To summarize, this gives us a discard outlet, unblockable, and potential card draw, all for 2 colorless mana. If you're not, you really need to ask yourself why you aren't running this. Another fantastic addition from Kaladesh is the Panharmonicon, which pretty much fits into any deck where there are multiple ETBs. For only 4 mana, we're able to double up not only just on creature enter the battlefield effects, but also artifacts, which is just a no-brainer for me. Speaking of enter the battlefield effects, chances are you'll have multiple creatures who you want to be able to reuse multiple times to get the most out of their benefits. This is easily done by recurring them with Alesha, but we have to get them to our yard, and we can't always count on our opponents to block or board wipe when we need them to. This is why I would consider running Spawning Pit, as it provides us with an instant speed, unlimited sacrifice outlet that also gives us 2/2 colorless spawn creatures should we pay 1 and remove 2 charge counters from it. It's kinda neat that they also have 2 power, as it kinda fits the theme that we're going for with the deck. The last artifact that I want to mention is one that a lot of people have brought up in other deck techs, and that's Sunforger. The likelihood that you're running this because it gives Alesha +4/+0 is very low. No, chances are you're running this because of its secondary activated ability, which reads pay 1 red, 1 white, and unattach it. Search your library for a red or white instant card with converted mana cost 4 or less, and cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then, shuffle your library. This powerful effects on a toolbox card more than makes up for having to pay 3 mana to re-equip it every time, and it allows us to find answers at critical moments that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. Speaking of red and white instant spells that can help us out in a jam, Deflecting Palm is a fantastic way to get around Voltron-based commanders who have hexproof and would otherwise outright kill us. As the spell does not require us to target it, we can still choose hexproof commanders and redirect the potentially lethal damage back at its controller. Since Cyclonic Rift's printing, it has become a staple in EDH, and chances are you're going to go up against it more often than not. To this end, I would strongly recommend running Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast as a ways to counter this. If they're not expecting it, very few opponents will consider 1 open red mana to be a real source against their Cyclonic Rift overload. 3 enchantments that I would strongly recommend running are Behind the Scenes, Reconnaissance, and Nahiri's Machinations. Each of these functions is a way to protect Nahiri, but offers it in a different route. Reconnaissance allows us to untap Nahiri after we're able to use her triggered ability, whereas Nahiri's Machination allows us to give Alesha Indestructible, meaning we can swing in without any fear. And finally, Behind the Scenes gives all of our creatures Skulk, which allows them not to be blocked by creatures that have greater power than they do. Rogue's Passage is a fantastic card, as it's a spell on a land that's able to give our commander unblockable. We're able to reuse it for every combat step, and it allows us to swing with our commander and get her triggered ability without any worries of being blocked by a bigger creature. Maze of Ith is an interesting card, as chances are you'll use it on your commander as often as you will your opponent's creatures, at least in this deck. Having the option of swinging with our commander to get her triggered ability and then being able to tap 1 land to untap her and prevent her from dying in combat is easily worth running the land that doesn't tap for mana. The last land I would recommend that you consider is Gaia-Reach Sanitarium from Eldritch Moon. We always want to have the option of being able to discard creatures from our hands to be able to cheat them out with Alesha, so having this ability for only having to pay 2 colorless and tapping a land is a great addition to the deck. Well gang, that's my take on Alesha Who Smiles at Death. What do you think? Do you enjoy this commander? She's an interesting addition to the Mardu lineup, and she's a narrow but fun reanimator commander. Please be sure to tune in every Monday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video, with a second video popping up sometime during the week. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta, or check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in part by support from my Patreons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below or in the About section. As always, thank you guys for watching, and please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more.